Hi, I'm Claire Harvey, one of the producers of the I Catch Killers podcast. We're getting ready to publish Season 2 for you in a few weeks. Between now and then, we'll have some bonus episodes publishing here. For this bonus episode, I interviewed Gary at a live-streamed event about his book I Catch Killers, which is available now from all good bookshops and online in paperback, ebook, and the audiobook coming in September. We hope you enjoy this interview. Gary Dublin, renowned author, former detective and journalist at News Corp Australia. Today we're celebrating Gary's book, I Catch Killers. And it's already doing well, Gary. It's climbing up the charts already.
Hi, Claire. Yeah, it's exciting. I didn't think I'd be sitting here with a book between us, but yeah, it's been an interesting journey the past 18 months or so.
Did you have visions of the book being on remainder piles in the front of book? Are you ready tomorrow to go through some bookshops and make sure it's front and centre?
That was my greatest fear. When it was put to me about writing a book, my greatest fear was it was on the tray out the front of some store as the cheap sale going for $3.95. So
yeah, right.
Hopefully it won't go that way, otherwise I'll be buying a lot of books.
I'll go and buy a few copies tomorrow just to make sure. But it is already, I think it's number 4 on the Amazon charts and it's number 2 on Booktopia's charts.
Certainly writing with Dan Box and the support from you guys, HarperCollins as well, and it's been a big team effort.
So what was the vibe between you and Dan? How did you get the story? How did Dan get the story out of you? And you know, was it Dan's in the UK, I believe? So was it some late night phone calls?
A lot of late night phone calls, or early morning phone calls for him, and late night phone calls for me. But I've known Dan for probably 8 years, quite a long time, because he was a crime reporter around the beats around Sydney with the Australian, and I got to know him well from his work on the Bowraville investigation. He did a book on Bowraville. What I liked about Dan is that he would call me on my bullshit. He knows me well enough, and he would challenge me. And we've got a good, a respectful relationship. I respected Dan, but I wanted someone that I didn't want to fluff over things. And he really called me on some stuff and said, "No, you've got to put it in if you're doing your memoirs." So it was a little bit raw. We agreed that we'll have arguments during the course of it, but surprisingly we didn't have arguments, difference of opinions, and but we wanted the book to really reflect what I'm about and my career and personal, and I think we've achieved that. What
was the gist of those conversations? Was Dan trying to get you to be more emotional and talk more about your personal life, or what?
It was like a session with a psychologist.
Did you cry?
No, I did not cry, and no one would know even if I did. But I laid on the lounge a couple of times while I was talking, just going, "No, Dan." He'd ring up and say, "Look, this isn't." Whenever he phoned me and said, "This is going to be uncomfortable for you," I'm going, "Oh, here we go." And,
it's going to be about women.
Well, women. There's a lot of stuff that's uncomfortable for me in my life. So yeah, he challenged me on it, and it was good. It was good. It was respectful. And we set off in writing the book. It didn't want to be, obviously I've had fallings out with people. We didn't want it to be my way of, this is it. So I said, embarrass me, but the book's not about embarrassing other people. It's my story, a reflection of my life and my thoughts, and so we concentrated on that. So I think we found the balance.
You're a year and a bit out of the cops now, aren't you? Probably 18 months, I guess.
Since about 18 months.
Yep, and your appeal is underway in the District Court of New South Wales. How are you feeling at the moment about your legal situation and your career situation? Do you feel as though are you hopeful about the appeal?
I'm hopeful about the appeal, but I was hopeful when it went to the local court. So I'm not going to get my hopes up one way or the other. We've presented the case as best we could. My legal team have been great, and I've always maintained the reason that I recorded the conversations, and I can't just change midstream and say, "Oh no, that's not the reason." That is the reason I recorded the conversations, and so we'll just see where it goes. But in terms of being comfortable, you're never comfortable going to court, and that's one thing I've learnt. I put people before the courts. It's humiliating, it's degrading to walk up those steps of the court, and especially with the focus that has been on this matter and what it's linked to, the William Tyrell investigation. It hasn't been a good time. It's not when I appear at court, it's not one of those days I look forward to.
I've been coming along to some of the hearings, and I've been really touched to see the victims' families who were there. Mark and Faye Levison have attended almost all your, probably all your court appearances. Some of the families from Bowraville. William Tyrrell's foster mum has been there. Yeah. How did that come about? How did they come to be there?
Look, and this is probably, with all that I've been through, and my family support me, friends support me, colleagues have supported me. But having the support of the victims' families meant more than anything to me. Like Mark and Faye, the Bowraville mob, William Tyrrell's family. But not just that. I've had phone calls from crooks I've had dealt with in the past. All sorts of families, people and victims from the past, going back 20 years, that have reached out to me, and it's been quite humbling actually. And when it's all said and done, I look and think, well, it's not too bad what I'm going through for people like that to stand up and support me and just really, put their reputation on the line to support me, and that meant so much.
Yeah, I've been touched talking to the Levisons at the hearings, and in all the sort of frustrations of a court hearing where you're standing around waiting for ages, and there's the courtroom's crushed and you can't get a seat and all that kind of stuff. They're constantly referring back to when they were going through court in relation to Matt's matter, the death of their son. And it does put it in perspective. You're right. It's their last experience of court was being there, trying to find out what had happened to their beautiful boy. You know, it's probably nice for them to have an opportunity to show you some love. And
well, I suppose it puts in perspective from my point of view. I've got nothing to worry about what they went through and what all the other families that have supported me or reached out have been through going through a court when they're trying to find out what's happened to their loved one, and it's horrendous. And it helps me. It puts it in perspective. And I walk away from a career, and I've walked. Well, when I say walked away, a little bit of a push in the circumstances. I didn't. I think it was fairly clear I didn't have a future in the police, but and it's not the way I thought I'd retire. But this has probably meant more to me, and I carry this with greater pride. The fact that families that I've worked with in the past have reached out and supported me. So.
We talked a little bit about Bowraville, and you mentioned Dan's involvement with Bowraville. That was a really amazing story of journalism and of police work. You became involved in this case that had been bubbling along for a while with the death of 3 Aboriginal children from a town on the mid-north coast of New South Wales called Bowraville. And you tried really hard for a lot of years to get a journalist interested in that story, didn't you? And Dan was the first one who actually did it.
Yeah, and my story there was that in the nature of the work I do, there was a lot of investigations that attracted media attention. So the journalists were contacting me about particular cases. And I would always be saying, but what about this case? 3 kids have been murdered, a serial killer, what we believe to be a serial killer, in a small country town, and that person hasn't been called into account. And I can see the journalist's eyes light up and go, tell me about the story. Yeah. And I talk about Bowraville, and it's a sign of the times. Like the feedback would be, oh, look, it's already been covered. And there had been some coverage on it, but there wasn't the outrage. And the Bowraville family said to me, if it was 3 white kids on the North Shore that were murdered in those circumstances, everyone would know about it, everyone would talk about it. And it wasn't the case, because they were a marginalised group of people, and Aboriginal. I don't think people could identify, and that racism, whether it's conscious or unconscious bias against them, played a part.
Part of the issue there was, I think, from the media's point of view, and probably from the police right at the beginning, was, there would be someone in a newsroom saying, well, the parents were drunk and there were parties going on, and, why weren't they looking after their kids, and, all those kind of misunderstandings or prejudices. But the point about the Bowraville deaths is, as we've discussed before, that often those people are the ones who are preyed upon by criminals.
It was predatory behaviour on what happened to the children, and the predator was in parts creating that environment as well. And that was people would play that to me, or push that thought that you said, and I liken it to someone been killed, one punch murder in the city at 2 o'clock in the morning. You could pretty well be confident that everyone has probably been partaking in alcohol. Do we not investigate it? Do we just step away and go, oh, well, that person was out drinking late at night? I think people come up with those reasons to make them feel better about themselves because they don't like to be challenged that we didn't care as much about those 3 kids being murdered because they were Aboriginal kids. And it's sad but true. And the families told me that when I first became involved in the investigation, and I didn't believe them. But I'm sitting here now 25 years down the track and they were 100% right.
One of the things that podcasting, Dan's Bowraville stories were a podcast and then became a book, has taught me and has taught lots of journalists, I think, is the value of a cold case, that it's never too late to go back to an old crime. We've got a question from Sarah from our Facebook audience. Thanks for that, Sarah, and please feel free to send questions in, by the way. What do you make of the public's interest in true crime? Does it help police generally, or can it be a hindrance?
Look, I understand the interest in true crime because I think it's a side of the world that people don't get to see. That is in part what drew me to being a police officer. You're sort of delving into this mystery world of crime and different things. So I understand the interest. I don't think it hinders police in investigation. It certainly didn't from my point of view. I think the interest in it is not a hindrance. If people aren't interested in it, then you have that situation that happened with Bowraville, where it just gets swept under the carpet. I think the interest creates accountability, and accountability in any industry, not just policing, is important. But
is it accountability within the police force to ensure that resources are being devoted to crimes that could be solved, or?
I think that plays a part to say that the police are not react or don't react to public opinion. I think is a little bit naive. If there's an attention on a particular investigation, resources do, because of the public outcry, and police are public servants, so we're there to serve the public. So I do think it helps encouraging the proper resources to be put into investigations. Yeah.
There's a scepticism, though, within the police about the media, isn't there? I mean, we are sometimes symbiotic and sometimes very, very hostile. You know, and you took the approach from early in your career, as I've learnt in the book, that that if you could use the media to help you, then you would. The media was another investigative tool almost for you.
Yeah, and I've come in for a lot of criticism within the police organisation for my use of the media, but if I'm investigating a crime, and I'll use every tool available. You know, when I say I'll push the envelope on jobs, that's what I'm talking about, using every tool. So if a tool is the media, I use the media. Appeals to the public. It's not something novel. It's not something that I came up with. Everyone understands the importance of it. But I don't mind the scrutiny. And I think we can use the media. I've never... and yeah, police have a good relationship with the media sometimes, others not so good. But I've always thought that it's something that could be used, and yeah, I've used it accordingly.
I was interested last week to see that the New South Wales Police have started a podcast, possibly inspired by the podcast that we've been working on. Well, no, I Catch Killers. I think they've been working on it for a while. But have you had a listen to it, and what do you think?
I've had a listen, and look, my point of view is I think it's great if they're engaging the public to help solve crimes. I think that's a positive step. I've always maintained that if the public are out there and they can help us with an investigation, get out there. And I think, and I've only heard a portion of the podcast, but part of the success with I Catch Killers, I think people with their interest in true crime want to know what the detectives are doing, and I don't know how it plays out, but I think people are actually interested in the detectives that are working the case, talking about the case, and getting an insight there rather than just a police spokesperson talking about a crime, having the police that are actually involved talking about it. And, but, yeah, use every tool available, so I'm not critical of it. I think if it works and assists with the investigation, it's probably a good idea.
We've got a question from Jane about investigative tools. She says, what do you see as the most valuable modern tool that assists police in an investigation, e.g. DNA, phone forensics, CCTV? In the event that there are no witnesses to a crime, what is your top type of evidence that you cross your fingers will be present?
All of them, if I could cross my fingers. It's changed so much since I've been investigating homicides for over 25 years, and yeah, no mobile phone, so you check the home phone records. It was very simple. The type of data that's available from the phone, that is a big benefit to police, but it's a double-edged sword in a degree, because there is so much information that you've got to sift through and a lot of analytical work that's been done. I think it makes it harder for the crook. Like, you try and commit a crime in the city and not have some form of tracing, so I think it makes life harder for them. DNA is something that, when I first started investigating homicides, hadn't come into play, and I used one of the first DNA pieces of DNA evidence to solve the murder of Eileen Cantley.
Wow.
And that was, I was working with Jim Williams at the time. He was my sergeant, and we were blown away by the fact that we've got some body fluids were left at the crime scene.
This is an old lady who was murdered.
Yeah, Eileen Cantley. She was in her 80s and she was murdered in a home at Asquith, and it was a horrible crime. And I was working at Hornsby Detectives at the time. And
so you weren't a homicide detective at
I
this
wasn't
point,
a homicide detective, and it was just when Jim took on the case, I started working on that. And what we found about that, we had a suspect on it, a very good suspect, following all the leads, and we had very good reason. And we got his DNA and provided it to the laboratories, and the laboratories came back and said, that bloke's not your killer. And we've gone,
What? What?
Oh, what? Well, I think we said a few other words than what. It really surprised us. And then we had another suspect, got his DNA, tested it, and then said, yeah, that's your killer. Or I won't say killer because there's still investigations to do, but we've put him at the crime scene. We were so confused by it, we asked to actually go down to the laboratories to have a look, and they're showing us the charts because we needed it to be explained, because if we're going to drag someone into an interview room and say, we know you were there just on this chart, but yeah, it is a very powerful tool.
Is DNA enough? You know, in that case, did you? I mean, this is obviously, maybe that's not the best example because it was so long ago. But nowadays, if there was only DNA and nothing else, do you think you could get a conviction?
Look, it would depend on the circumstances, but it has to be supported with facts, not just DNA. I think DNA could, not contested, that is your DNA at the crime scene, but the circumstances how that DNA got there. So it's a very important role crime scene officers play, and the continuity of exhibits it's seized. And so when you're seeing a crime scene in this day and age, you see everyone kitted up and they've got their overalls on, all the masks on and gloves. That's so there's no contamination, because it is becoming such a delicate science. You can't afford to get misleading reads from the DNA evidence.
So if I touched a pen or something that, and then I walked into the crime scene and put it down on a table, it would transfer. The DNA would transfer.
Potentially, and that's because it's getting so refined, the test. So if you picked up that glass and then I picked it up, my DNA might be on your fingers or whatever. So that's the type of thing. So it's not the be all and end all of an investigation, but it certainly gives you a help. And CCTV footage is another thing.
It's always amazing when you watch spy shows or old cop shows, and you know the sort of crimes that could not be committed today because of CCTV.
I think it's a pretty tough gig now, trying to commit a crime and not. We can track you. Like, we'll walk out of here, people could track us through CCTV all over the city. So it's a big tool, but we as the police, I forget. No. Me as a journalist, the police, the resourcing, it makes it more complicated too, because before, when I'd start off a murder investigation, I didn't need all that analytical work. Now we need so much more work done. So that's why I say it's a double-edged sword, but it's certainly a powerful tool.
Is there a risk that it makes cops lazy, or not lazy is not the right word, but that, you know, in the event that DNA is not enough and you still need more to persuade a jury, that you kind of lose the focus on tiny fibres and fingerprints and you know, motive, all that kind of stuff? I
have seen that there's no fingerprint or no DNA, or we haven't got any call charge records, or because the phone didn't ping off a certain tower, therefore it can't be that person. you've still got to get in and do the grunt work as a detective. And my thing being a detective was opportunity, capability and motive. They're the three things I look when I'm looking for a suspect. And if I can tick all three boxes, it's not enough to convict a person, but it's enough to point me in a direction and have a look at it. Call it a hunch, call it instinct on those type of things. Then you've got to overlay that with the scientific evidence that you get from phone records, get from DNA, to overlay the hunch, and that supports it. You can't go one or one on its own, I should say.
Because ultimately you've got to get it in front of a jury, don't you?
Yeah, and prove beyond reasonable doubt, and that's a very high regard. And we come up against some very smart barristers, and if they can catch you out in any regards, the defence barristers and solicitors, they will, and so you've got to be tight.
We'll be back with more from Gary after this. Stu asks, what's the most terrifying encounter you've ever had? Are there any cases from your past that still keep you awake at night?
Okay, I'll answer the second part first, like staying awake at night. With the type of crimes that I've been investigating, murders, and for a while homicide was hit, and homicide and serial violent crime, so we're doing serial rapists as well. And so you're looking at pure evil. And there are times, and I don't wake up with the cold sweat in the middle of the night, but sometimes I just get an overwhelming feeling of, I won't say depression, depression's not the right word, but just sick of seeing the darkness that the world offers. And some jobs, and it might be you've had a busy on-call week and you've gone to a crime scene and it just wears you down. The other thing that haunts, and haunt might be too strong a word, but it certainly plays on your mind, is the victims' families and the way that the pain that they're going. You walk away and you think, well, they're carrying so much grief, and it's very hard to walk away from that. In terms of terrifying experiences, sometimes logging into the computer's terrifying for me. That's terrifying. Look, I've done, I probably in the book you see it, like I've done a lot of tactical policing as well, and I've enjoyed the tactical policing. Your adrenaline's rushing, you've got firearms and you're going to take down a bad guy. I love that part of policing. I've had a couple of incidents. There was one where I was doing a stakeout for a drug job, and there was three police in the bush, and we were in probably 2 or 3 kilometres away from our car because we had to sneak in. It was on Crown land, and we're waiting for the people manufacturing the drugs to come back. And I had one a junior police officer probably 100 metres away from me, and the bad guys came in with some attack dogs, and they were big, scary dogs. And I'm hiding in the bush with a friend, and I've got another one on the police radio calling if he sees them coming in. And I'm laying there nice and quiet in the bush, and then all of a sudden these 2 German Shepherds come running out of the bush after us. And I was with my colleague called Paul. We both got up and sprinted, and we got to, it was near Wiseman's Ferry, and we sprinted probably 50 metres, but we were covert, so we couldn't scream. We both wanted to scream, but we couldn't scream.
How far away were the German Shepherds?
Oh, they were getting close. Like they were outrunning us, and they didn't look like they were going to muck around. And yeah, we had our guns, but again, we were trying to be covert that we're there because it was on Crown land.
Blowing away a German Shepherd would kind of give away your location.
Give away the location. What was that? But we ran, and then we got to what was like a cliff, and we both thought at the same time, okay. And we turned, we picked up big sticks and ran at the German Shepherds, and they backed off. And our heart beats, like that. We waited about 30 seconds, and then I heard the other police officer that was there that was on his own. I heard screams, and you could hear dogs obviously attacking someone. And then I heard gunshots, and then the officer was calling out my name, and clearly something terrible had happened. I've heard a few gunshots, and so Paul and I sprinted off in the direction where he was calling my name. It was probably 100 metres through thick bush, and we've just come round the corner, and the police officer that was calling out my name was covered in blood down the front of his shirt, and what had happened, and the dogs had attacked him. He's wrestling with the dogs, and he's tried to shoot the dogs, and blew off a couple of his fingers.
Oh my God.
And so that, I thought he had been shot in the chest.
Yeah.
So I took my shirt off and, we're trying to find out where the injury is.
Where were the dogs at this stage?
The dogs had run off at that
scared
stage.
by the gunfire.
And so we're treating him, and then we saw that he had the damage, so we bandaged that up. But we were probably an hour away from anyone coming out to help us, and no one would come out until we cleared it, because there was a suggestion that the crook had a gun as well. So that, yeah, I know.
It's not funny. I'm not laughing
it's not
at
funny.
you.
Well, I can tell another funny one that I think... Oh, I've got a couple of funny ones that all police have. There was one time, and I think I've made reference to it in the book, where we were catching someone that was on the run. I think there was a warrant out for his arrest or his escape from prison. And we came up with a plan, and there was a chicken coop in the backyard. So I thought, we got there early in the morning, I will lay under the chicken coop, because there was a space of about 8 inches. I used to be an electrician, so I was used to getting under the
dark, horrible places,
under the floor. And I'm on the police radio. I'm laying there for a couple of hours because we had to see him before we could make the arrest. And I'm laying there, my legs are starting to go numb, and I contacted my colleagues who were parked down the road, and I said, I've seen him. He's just come to the back door. And it's about a 30 metre across the backyard. I said, I'll go in 10. So I got ready, and I went and I charged across the backyard, grabbed him, crashed into the door, into the back of the place, and I'm wrestling with him on the ground. There's all these confused people standing in the house staring at him. I'm thinking, this is all right, I've declared I'm a police officer, I'm wrestling with this bloke on the ground, and I'm waiting for my mates to come crashing through the front door. But they didn't turn up. So all these people are thinking, who is this lunatic that's run out of the chicken coop and wrestled? And then the crook is starting to say, he's a cop, belt him. And I'm like, this is not going well, where are my mates? They thought I was going to call them in 10 seconds or whatever. There was miscommunication on the radio. So they're just parked down the road.
I've come I wonder what's happened to Gary.
I came wrestling out of the house with this bloke, and they've turned up. And, we have a laugh about it, and I laugh about it now. But it is, it's quite
I thought you were going to say your legs went numb, and then when you tried to run, you found yourself flat on your face.
No, but that's funny you should say that, because when I did tactical policing with the SPSU, which is a support unit for the Tactical Operations Unit, where we would be kitted up with you, and you might be sitting in a car, just sitting, waiting for the people to come in and rob a bank. And sometimes it happens really quick, and you jump out of the truck or whatever you're sitting in, and your legs are numb. So you've got to remember to keep moving your toes. But it's all I see it as the fun side of policing. And when I say fun, there's danger involved, but
we've got a question from Leanne T saying, if there was one thing you wanted the world to know about policing that you think most people are unaware of, what would it be? One of the things that I've always been interested in, you talking about is that love of tactical policing, that often that was actually fun.
Yeah, look, I think everyone joins the police for a different reason. I think we all basically join because you want to do some good, but also interested in the type of work that you do. In terms of what the public don't know about police, I think a way of probably answering that is that policing changes people. I've changed from who I was when I joined the police, and I think anyone that's experienced that side of life in policing will change. Now, it can be argued whether it's for the better or worse. It certainly throws you in the deep end of life's experiences. You experience death, you experience fear. There's a lot of things, and you see the pain and suffering, and so it does change you. So I think when we're talking about police, what the public don't know is that what they're seeing, the end result of a policeman, or halfway through his or her career, they've probably been changed and become a little bit battle-hardened from what they've seen as a police officer, if they're a working police officer and out there doing their job.
We've got a question from Montana, who's 16, and thank you very much, Montana, for watching. She's a massive fan of Gary and very invested in crime, and wants in the future to be a detective. She's also a keen follower and supporter of the William Tyrell case. She asked, do you think being taken off the William Tyrell case is going to affect finding William and jeopardising the work that's already been done?
Big question for a 16-year-old. You might become a good detective. Look, I haven't done a handover, and this is not groundbreaking news. I've said that I haven't not done a formal handover from the information I retained for 4 years leading the investigation. I think, and I don't want to turn it into a squabble between, should they done this to me or not, but the families deserve better than the internal wranglings going on in the police, and it's very unfortunate. And to say it hasn't impacted on the investigation, I think that's a little bit naive. I hope, since I've been taken off the investigation, the New South Wales Police, because I know they care about the job, are putting the resources into. But the William Tyrell investigation, we can't give up on it, and that's what I maintained from the outset. 3-year-old child has disappeared in a dead-end street in a small rural town. We need to find the answers for it, and we should never give up until we find the answers. But certainly, I was confident in the direction I was heading in. Obviously, 4 years down the track, it's not an easy investigation. The fact that I've been taken off the investigation, does that make the difference whether it gets solved or not solved? I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of my catch-up with Gary. Part 2 will publish here next week, where we'll talk about some of the most difficult cases he's worked on. See you then.